History 102, Lecture 8, World War II, Part Japanese-American Internment. In this video, we'll cover Japanese-American Internment. One of the reasons why I wanted to focus on this is, in my 23 years of teaching college, I note that a lot of students don't know a lot about Japanese-American Internment. So, I will go over it. You're welcome. Number one, what are some issues? What are some issues that we got to deal with? First thing, why do many American students not know a lot about this event? A lot of people don't know a great detail about Japanese-American Internment. Number one, it doesn't present the U.S. in a good light during World War II. In World War II, we're the good guys, right? We're the good guys. Good guys don't do bad things, right? Like drink Pepsi. Right? Good guys don't do bad things. Okay? We're the good guys. And so, Japanese-American Internment does not make us look like good guys. We look kind of like the bad guys. And so it doesn't present the U.S. in a good light. So that's one issue why it may not be talked about in depth. Number two, U.S. historians and a lot of educators in the American educational system tend to be, quote-unquote, left on the political spectrum. Liberal, progressive, or worse, socialist, communist. And in that vein, most historians want you to love FDR. Okay? Most historians, they want you to think FDR is a great guy. You are supposed to leave the American history classroom loving FDR and thinking he's a great guy. Okay. So, obviously, a bad thing wouldn't be talked about much. A lot of historians downplay Japanese-American Internment because it doesn't make FDR look good. And so you kind of downplay that. Okay. I'll give you an example. Here at CSN, I was talking to another instructor one day. This instructor practically prayed to FDR. I mean, FDR saved America! FDR saved America! FDR this, FDR that. I mean, I'm like, are you finished? Just, this instructor practically prayed to FDR. Okay. Greatest guy ever. I brought up Japanese-American Internment, and he was sputtering. He could no longer speak. He bent over backwards to try to justify Japanese-American Internment. It wasn't that bad. I mean, it was hilarious. It was like, as long as there's a guy I liked, it's okay to round people up and violate their civil liberties because I like the guy. And it bothers me, but so that's another issue. A lot of your history teachers want you to pray to FDR. You're supposed to love FDR, right? That's why you're fortunate to have me. I'm not going to teach you to pray to FDR. But anyways, so it's kind of downplayed. Another issue. It's a civil liberty issue. 125,000 people, most of them U.S. citizens, vast majority U.S. citizens, had their civil liberties violated. Why? Because the government suspected them. What was the evidence that they were suspected? They looked like our enemy. They looked like the enemy country we're fighting against. Okay. You need to ask this question, why are your civil liberties the first to go at an emergency? Why is the first thing you're supposed to give up is your God-given civil rights, your God-given liberties and freedom? Why is that the first thing government wants you to cough up? Okay. I would like you to think about that. I don't care what you think. You can think whatever you want. But I need you to think about it for a minute. Why are civil liberties the first to go? Right. Why is the first thing, let government do whatever it wants to you? Okay. I have a famous quote. I have a quote I like to say. Public safety, the alibi of tyrants. Think about that. Public safety. Because people, that was the government excuse to round up 125,000 Japanese-looking people. People of Japanese descent. That was the excuse. Public safety. That was the excuse. We need to round up 125,000. We need to round up all these people that look Japanese, Japanese Americans. Their crime, looking Japanese. Bastards. Okay. And so that's an issue to think of. It's a civil right. Think about civil rights. Why? Why is that the first thing to go? One of the reasons students like me is I give you all the sides. I talk about both sides. Okay? I talk about different points of view. That's why students like me. I actually educate you. I actually give you an education. You actually learn something with me. And I learned what the teacher thought. In a lot of classes, that's what you might learn. You learn the teacher's opinions on things. Why students like me is they actually learn something other than the teacher's opinions. Okay. And I've heard that. I'm not boasting. That's what students have told me. I've seen reviews. I've had students to my face say, "Thank you, Mr. Beals. I actually learned something. It wasn't just you spouting off for 50 minutes about your opinion on things. You actually talked about something. I actually learned something." But so, would you like a pro-internment book? Sure, and it is out there. I'm in Defense of Internment by Michelle Malkin, 2004. There you go. So, I will be saying bad things about Japanese American internment. Would you like a pro-internment book? Okay, there you go. And just like with the Holocaust, I talked about Holocaust revisionist arguments. Okay, there's your other side. Okay, and when we studied them, we talked about them. How do they stand up against the primary documents? Okay, well here you go. You want a pro-internment book, In Defense of Internment by Michelle Malkin, 2004. Okay. Michelle Malkin is not a historian. She's a political commentator. She's American. She's Chinese by descent, which may be ironic, but she's Chinese by descent. She's still around. You can Google her. She writes books. She's a political commentator. Her argument was, so the context of her book, in 2004, it was right after 9/11. The U.S. government had the Patriot Act, and so they were trying to, we got to go after suspected terrorists, and lo and behold, a lot of terrorists are Arab, apparently. And so you had the Patriot Act, and the U.S. government, kind of looked through, we need to find the terrorists. Okay. And during that era, there were some questions about our civil liberties being violated. Okay? Or civil liberties being violated. And so Michelle Malkin wrote a book. She supported Bush administration policies. And so the book was in Defense of Internment. So her point of view was, here in the early 2000s, after 9/11, we're at war, the war on terror against the terrorists. We need to go and find out who the terrorists are. So the Patriot Act is great. And then she went back and looked at the 1940s. Were there Japanese spies in the United States before World War II in the early 40s? Yes. Yeah, there were. There were a few Japanese spy rings in the United States before World War II. In the early 40s. That's absolutely true. Okay. Does that justify rounding up children as suspected spies and sending them to a camp, an internment camp? So. So Michelle Malkin, that's her argument, is that the government, just like the government today in 2004 is justified in using extraordinary measures to hype terrorists, the U.S. government in the early 40s is completely justified in order to combat Japanese spy rings, rounding up everyone. Okay. So that is a pro-internment link. So there you go. If you want to, I have it in my office. I have it here somewhere. I have it somewhere in my office here. But so there you go. You're welcome. That's why you shouldn't like me. I give you all the sides. Okay. So what is the background? What is the background to Japanese-American internment? In 1940, before Pearl Harbor, the U.S. government cracked a Japanese diplomatic code called MAGIC. For a good year and a half, the U.S. government is able to capture and decode, intercept and decode secret messages between the Japanese government and its embassies around the world. Which, by the way, is an argument for, like, some people think the U.S. government knew about Pearl Harbor. This is one of the evidences. We were reading Japanese diplomatic cables before Pearl Harbor for a good year. And so that leads, that's for, there are some people who think that we knew about Pearl Harbor beforehand, and that's one of the evidences. But I'm going off track. But anyways, and I personally don't think that. I don't think we knew about it before it happened, but that's actually evidence. We did crack the code before Pearl Harbor. In the summer of 1941, there are primary documents you can read. There are primary documents, there are diplomatic cables that the U.S. government intercepted, where the Japanese government is encouraging Japanese diplomats in the U.S. to recruit spies among the Japanese-American population in the western United States, or in the United States. Okay. So, and like I said, yes, there are, you can read the papers there. There were some Japanese spies captured. There was a famous one in San Diego, of a Japanese spy ring in San Diego. Several guys caught spying. And so, yes, there are Japanese spies in the United States. A few. In February 1942, because of Pearl Harbor and this evidence that, the Japanese government is encouraging spies, President Franklin Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, which allows the military to create exclusion zones. So where the U.S. military can say, hey, certain civilians or civilians cannot live in this area. And that is the basis for Japanese-American internment, Executive Order 9066. So it's not a piece of legislation, it's an executive order. By the way, if I can share my personal opinion, I believe executive orders are unconstitutional and illegal. It doesn't matter which party does them, but just so you know my personal opinion. And to me, this would be an example. To me, this Executive Order 9066 would be an example. This executive orders subvert the constitutional process. What does the U.S. Constitution say? Does it say the president can unilaterally order policy? No, it doesn't. Okay. So if I can share my opinion with you for a minute, I believe executive orders are unconstitutional and illegal. And that goes for either political party. I'm bipartisan. I think it doesn't matter what team does it. It's wrong. And to me, this is an example. But this Executive Order 9066 is an example of unconstitutional and illegal when you allow the president that much power where they can just sign a piece of paper and 125,000 people's civil rights are violated because one man, a dictator, that sounds like a dictator, doesn't it? Can just sign a piece of paper and subvert the constitutional process. So anyways, and to me there's an example of it. I mean, FDR, this is a dictatorial, totalitarian behavior. Shrug his pen. you can strip away people's civil rights. But anyways, so, and just so you know, I'm opposed. It doesn't matter what team. Doesn't matter what team does it. I don't like it. It's unconstitutionally illegal. Executive orders are totalitarian, tyrannical, illegal, unconstitutional, and wrong. Okay, anyway, so there you have that. 1939 to 1941, 45, 1945, you do have 10 convictions for spying for the Japanese government. So yes, there are Japanese spies in the U.S. before the war. So to justify telling a 5-year-old he has to go live in a camp because he's a suspected spy, I don't think so personally, but you know what it is. The WCCA, you have the Wartime Civil Control Administration and the War Relocation Authority. Those are the government agencies set up to run the internment camp system. The numbers vary. But around 125,000 Japanese American people of Japanese American descent, people are relocated or interned. About 2/3 of them are U.S. citizens. And again, I've read things that say 175,000. I've seen 100,000. There's a range. I would just split the difference, 125,000. And by the way, that kind of goes back to the numbers game. Does that matter? If only 100 people got their civil rights violated, you start arguing, you start reducing human beings to numbers. Only 3 million Jews died. It was it wasn't a Holocaust. Okay, I mean, what? Anyways, some pictures. This is a political cartoon from the era. This was the fear. This political cartoon signals the fear. Waiting for the signal from home. Okay. What the fear is you have the honorable fifth column that once the war started, Japanese people waiting for the signal for home would line up and get their dynamite, their TNT, their very handed dynamite, to go blow things up and sabotage things. So this political cartoon kind of summarizes the fear of the time period that's why you think it's somebody Japanese descent is gonna, even if they're a U.S. citizen, if they get the signal from home, they're gonna line up for their TNT and blow things up. Here's another political cartoon, military zone, out of harm's way. That's the justification. Out of harm's way. Okay. This is the executive order. So this is the primary document. Okay. Here's a newspaper from the era. Ouster of all Japs in California near. So this is the spring of 1942. The San Francisco Examiner, to be exact. Okay. So how would I know? How would I know I'm being relocated, Mr. Bills? So this is the primary document. You would see this in government buildings, school, the newspaper, stores, or you see it around. The radio would talk about it. You'd be ordered to appear. What it is it tells you where to go. These are all instructions on what you're supposed to do to be relocated. Okay. Instructions to all persons of Japanese ancestry. And then it just gives all kinds of instructions. What you're supposed to do, where you're supposed to go. Like that. A lot of students don't know this. Canada actually did some Japanese American internment as well. So, there you have that. Here's a map of the internment system. The triangles are the internment camps. Topaz, Tule Lake. The most famous one is Manzanar in California. But if you notice, there's all kinds of smaller areas. The black line is the exclusion zone. Okay. We live in Las Vegas, so Las Vegas would be just outside the exclusion zone. But there are examples of the U.S. government trying to intern Japanese people of Japanese descent in Las Vegas. It didn't happen because one of the famous ones, and he was pretty famous. His name was Bill Tomiyasu. He was a local farmer, tons of fruits and vegetables. The newspapers, people actually stood up and said, "You're not going to intern Bill Tomiyasu." Bill Jap was his nickname, but they were like, "You're not interning the guy. He's a loyal American. He's also a prominent citizen." And so there's actually a Las Vegas internment story. Bill Tomiyasu was a famous farmer in Vegas. And he was from Japan. The U.S. government tried to intern him, and actually, like Las Vegas residents, government said no. Were there court challenges to internment? Yes. Yes, Way versus the U.S. Hirabashi. Korematsu is the most famous one. In all three of these cases, the Supreme Court decided that it was okay for the government to violate citizens' constitutional rights because the government said it was okay. And so this is one of the, to me, my historical argument is, this is one of the examples where the U.S. Supreme Court, rather than being faithful to the U.S. Constitution, decided to go along with the government. The government said we need to round them up, so the Supreme Court said okay. The Supreme Court bought the government argument that it is okay to violate people's civil rights as long as we have a good excuse. Okay? And I want you to think about that. Think about it. Is there anything the government should never, ever be allowed to do, regardless of the excuse? I hope your answer is, yeah, there's a long list. There's a long list of things government should never, ever be allowed to do. Okay. And there's a list of things government has done that they should never, ever be allowed to do. Okay. I won't get into it, but last 6 years. Anyways, I won't get into it, but it's just really, one of my goals as your history instructor, if I could brainwash you for a minute, you need to think about that. Okay, you honestly need to think about it. There has to be, if you do not want to live in a totalitarian police state, there's got to be things government can never, ever do. Okay? Okay, you need to ask yourself why you're so willing to cough up your civil rights and why you go along with whatever government says. Okay? So, anyways, rant over. Here's an interesting little historical note. 1980s, legal historian Peter Irons came across some, by that point, declassified documents where the U.S. military, there are some U.S. military documents that argued or stated that Japanese American citizens did not pose a national security threat. Could that have helped Korematsu and Hirabashi and Yasui? Yeah. Because in 1942 and 3, what is the U.S. government saying? They're a threat. We need them put in a camp. Right? But here you have Iron, Pure Iron, the lawyer investigating. He comes across declassified documents that at the time, there are some U.S. government military officials going, they're not threats. So the old government was defeating his case. Okay. Life in the camps. So notice would appear. Notice would appear in the paper. You report to the train station. You get on it. You're expected to quit your jobs, close businesses, sell your house, and load up. Enforcement was by local law enforcement and the military police. Okay. So that's actually another little tidbit. The police are going to do whatever the government tells them to do, even if it violates your civil rights. Okay. The job of the police is to enforce the law and whatever the government wants done. Okay. Regardless of your civil rights. Okay. That's why during coronavirus, people are arrested for trying to go to church, meet in church. The police arrested them because the government said you can't worship in a church. Okay, you can't exercise your freedom of religion. Okay, and then so that's an example. The police are going to enforce the law and what government says. So local law enforcement and the military police enforce this. You're supposed to report to a train station by a certain date and time. Here's the primary document, a picture, closing out, evacuation. So it's open. It's like, you go into a store one day, owned by a man of Japanese descent, and he'll tell you, government said I had to leave. And here's a picture, people lined up. What's interesting is when you look at this picture, it looks like they're just going on vacation, right? You couldn't take very many things, so you weren't allowed to pack a whole lot. So that's why these people, they're lined up, ready to go. You have military police on the other side. Here's another picture. It looks like they're going on vacation. Okay, here we go. Right. Here's another picture. Again, looks like we're just headed to a vacation. Camp life. You lived in barracks, military barracks. So the U.S. government is running this, and so they're going to use, it's going to look like the military. So the barracks are going to be military issued. Your bedding, any clothes you don't bring are going to be military issue. Food is military issue. It's like you're in the army. Okay. Separate barracks for single men and women. Multiple families would be in one long barracks. Okay. You were allowed to set up a curtain or a false wall. There is a curfew and a stockade for violating camp rules. Food's provided by the U.S. Food Administration. And if you're a student, there'll be a school. One of the barracks will be a school. This is a picture of Manzanar. Looks like it's barracks. Looks like an army base. A little closer picture. These are people lining up to get processed in. Okay. This is a family here. They're setting up. They're getting set up. You can kind of see it's very Spartan. Okay. These are people. This is a Manzanar in California. These are men that have signed up to join the military. That was one way for men to get out, is if you signed up for the military. I find it ironic. We don't trust you to live in San Francisco, but we do trust you to be on a boat in the Pacific fighting the Japanese. Hey, baseball. Here's a baseball game in an internment camp. Okay. Playing the ball. Ladies, don't feel left out, ladies. Here's ladies playing ball. And so ladies are playing. You want to play football? We got football going on, so kind of life in the camps. Here's a lady with her children. Okay, so it's kind of, on vacation almost, it looks like. Here's a national security threat looking at the camera with his other national security threat friends. They're playing dodgeball. This is probably the teacher in the background, refereeing the dodgeball game. So, here's a young lady in her part of the room. This is probably a little brother. So whoever's bump this is, she probably takes care of the little brother or sister. Leaving camp, just like I said, guys could leave the camp if you sign up for the military. The camps were shut down around 1946 after the war. No compensation for loss of property, business, or income. You're given a bus ride back to wherever you live, and good luck. You're starting your life over again. You may or may not have your house. This is a picture of Japanese American soldiers. Apology and restitution. In 1988, President Ronald Reagan signed legislation where the U.S. government officially apologized for Japanese American internment, and the U.S. government set aside $1.6 billion to be dispersed to survivors or heirs of Japanese American internment. And so, 1950s and 90s, there were lawsuits, and this legislation signed by President Reagan was kind of meant to, settle those lawsuits. If you guys would like to read some books about Japanese American internment, you can. So, federal demander, Janine Houston, that's her married name. She is Japanese. When Janine was a teenager, she lived in Manzanar. She lived in Manzanar for a while. And so Farewell to Manzanar is her biography, kind of. Manzanar is a more academic look. Stubborn Twig, more of an academic look. Baseball Saved Us by Ken Mochizuki, that's a primary document, meaning he lived in a camp. Only Cure, Infamy, Midnight, and Broad Daylight. So a lot of the most famous, or a lot of the most important books about Japanese American internment are from people who lived in the camp. So it's not secondary sources; they're primary documents. They're written by people who, lived in a camp. There is a Star Trek connection. I know we all like Star Trek because I like it. There is a Star Trek connection to Japanese American internment. Lieutenant Sulu, Captain Sulu, I believe he made it to Admiral, but Captain Sulu, Lieutenant Sulu, helmsman of the Starship Enterprise. So my brain just blinked on his name, but anyways, when he was a kid, before he appeared on the actor, before he appeared on Star Trek, he appeared in it, and I am probably going to hell for forgetting. So, George Takei. Anyways, I'm probably going to hell for forgetting. Anyways, my brain. I've been doing several hours of lectures, so. Anyways, Hideki, George Takei. Okay, so anyway, George Takei, he actually, when he was a kid, before he was an actor, he was a kid, he lived in a internment camp. He's still alive. So there are people today, they're still alive, who lived in internment camps. So anyway, so that is that. Thank you, and have a great day.